The purpose of this presentation is to give a little bit of overview about Mexico, and I know that there are many concerns about safety when people are looking to travel. So we would go through general things on the country, the distances between some points that have been in the news, and then some facts that I think are important for everybody to know. Security briefing, in the minds of everybody when they watch the news right now, they think about safety and how important it is, or if I would be safe to going down to Mexico. We see that there is a big difference between people who have been to Mexico recently and those who have not. And that goes to the point that those who have been to Mexico know that it's perfectly safe because they have experienced firsthand. And that's what we want to pass and to communicate. There are three very important reasons on why it's safe to go to Mexico that are not on the news, and I think they should be. The number one is the geography. Mexico is a very large country with more than 2 million square kilometers. That would be if Mexico is as large as combining UK, France, Spain, and Italy all together. That's almost half of Western Europe, Mexico. And when you see things in the news, they don't point out where those things happen. So the distance between the border to some parts in Mexico would be 2,000 mile distance. That it's exactly the same as going from Chicago, where we are based, all the way to Texas. So just to give that in perspective. The second very important thing is some statistics. If we show how different indicators and different numbers and different statistics of things that are happening in Mexico versus things that are happening in other cities in the United States, that would also give us, put us things in perspective. I was reading, for example, the news this weekend that there was a street in Chicago where there were 3 shootings on the same day. And that happens everywhere, but that doesn't mean that if in a bad neighborhood in Chicago happened a shooting, you could not come and visit Navy Pier or Michigan Avenue. The third very important one, and I think is the most strong one, is that in the last 12 months, more than 22 million people from other countries in the world have visited Mexico. 16 million just from the United States. And all the news, when they show things about bad things or the negative coverage, they never show one of those 22 million people who have come back and they have completely satisfied in their experience in Mexico, and that's the strongest one. This goes to the statistics. If we are using information from the FBI and from the United Nations in terms of how many people get killed by 100,000, as that's an international standard for measuring how violent a place could be. Mexico, as you could see, is a little bit more than 10, is 14 homicides by 100,000, and that's considering every single kind of homicide. That could be from the drug-related incidents to any violent in a more standard way that it can happen in a house or a particular incident. And if you could see, Mexico is well below all the other countries in Latin America, that Brazil, Belize, Colombia, Venezuela. And also using the same standard, Mexico is way below many cities in the United States like New York, Detroit, St. Louis, Baltimore, Washington, D.C. Finally, the strongest argument that 22 million people have visited Mexico in the last 12 months. And they come back, and we have some surveys that show that 97% of the international visitors to Mexico express that they would like to come back because they feel safe. That's, I think, the strongest point. That is exactly what I was mentioning, that 97% of the travelers express that they would return to vacation in Mexico after being in Mexico.
Why do you think the media only shows the negative or captures the negative attention and does not show the people saying good things?
There are many more things happening positive that we haven't spoken about it loud. And that's exactly why we are here and why it's important to have this presentation, to properly communicate what is going on in Mexico and to put things in perspective.
Because I agree with the statistic about the 97% that would want to return. You take about our 2,500 students a year that go to Mexico on spring break, 97% of them would want to come back or would do return. So I understand that the statistic, and it's basically the same for our spring break company. It's like a microcosm of the big picture, is the same statistic that we see of our students who will go and go with confidence. 97% would go back or say amazing things. So I really value that statistic.
As a female traveler to Mexico, are there any extra precautions that should be taken?
No, there's no extra precaution. Common sense kind of principles apply wherever you travel out of your home place. It could be inside the United States or outside. I would say that taking a tour with a company is the safe way to travel. Following any regular precaution, like not getting to any place that is completely isolated by yourself or things like that. But there is no particular thing that you would not do when you travel inside the United States that you have to do in Mexico.
You mentioned your partnership and kind of the way you work with Bianchi-Rossi Tours. Is there something in particular that you see that they do as a service that kind of stands out and that you would recommend for any traveler, perhaps if you have a son or daughter that would travel with them, and why you would travel with them?
Well, I have a kid. I'm a parent, and definitely I think when my kid would be at a certain age that he has to travel by himself. And I witnessed, and I think it's a very important point, I've witnessed myself how Bianchi-Rossi conducts the tours. I've been working probably 3 years with Bianchi-Rossi since I met the owner, Bob Bianchi, in Minneapolis, and it was more a business meeting, a regular business meeting. But then a few months ago, I was in Acapulco while he was conducting some tours, and he was leading the tour. So we agreed to meet, and I personally witnessed how he conducts the tours and how he himself, the owner, is in many of those trips making sure that things are properly done with his kids and with his own sons and his managers. And I see that he really goes the extra mile in taking care of every single kid. I've seen that he completely follows a list. He organizes private parties, so the kids are not out by themselves having their own thing. He takes care of who is getting inside a party. He's very careful, and so I definitely, to be honest, I am more willing to support Bianchi-Rossi after what I've seen and the kind of business that he conducts in Mexico.
What other elements of safety will the city do? Is there anything the city does and has set in place for any tourist?
Well, Puerto Vallarta, I know that, for example, they have some call boxes along the promenade, the boardwalk, the Malecon, what we call, where would be the similar things that you have in the U.S. university, where if you have an emergency, you can press a button and they would answer with whatever you might need. An important thing in Puerto Vallarta and most of the tourism destination and most around Mexico is that everybody would speak English fluently. We've been a tourism destination from back to the 50s and 60s when Acapulco started getting the jet set place. So there's a long tradition that we take care of tourists and we want tourists to come back.
Is there anything you could say to a future traveler to Mexico, or even a parent? Any advice you would give to somebody who's considering going to Mexico or having their son or daughter go? Anything you would like to say personally?
I think it's very important to really do the proper research on what is going down in Mexico. As I said, there has been no incidents happening to tourists. Tourists have been perfectly fine, and I think by doing a little bit of research, you would completely experience an unforgettable vacation, as 22 million people have done it.